Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I am your host, Paul LaFontaine. My guest today is a legendary figure in the class of 1986. Howard Zoll Curtis, Cullum number 43077, has the unusual distinction of having served over 200 hours of punishment tours in his time at the Academy. You will see in this podcast that Howie is sometimes not in the video frame. This is not a mistake or a quirk in the software. This is a living embodiment of how our guest transcends normal conventions and cannot fully be captured by mere technical contrivances. If the security organizations of this great nation can't control him, imagine the futility of civilian podcasting software in making the attempt. The entire internet isn't big enough to hold Howie. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of West Point, the Army, or any other government organization, most particularly the USMA Military Police Company. Now to the interview with the uncontainable and irrepressible Howie Curtis. Howie Curtis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Paul.
Great to have you here. Look, I'm going to start with the hard-hitting journalistic side of the podcast because we're here to deliver value to the people. Milk. Did you drink it at the Academy? Do you still drink it? And do you still drink it with ice?
Yes, I drank it at the Academy. I did drink it with ice there. And I also drink it with ice whenever I go out.
Fantastic. You're a great American, Howie. That's absolutely
I like milk. It's good for you.
Well, because we thought it was an odd thing for family members at home. They would give us glasses of ice, and we all were so busy, we would just pour milk in it with ice. And when visitors would come, they would make the comment, gee, that's weird that you drink milk with ice. And we would even comment on it. It took a kind of perverse pride in it. But what we didn't know, it was training us for standardization. It was saving energy because we weren't figuring out about the ice. And it actually contributed directly to the defeat of the Soviet Union in the Cold War. So, Howie, thank you for the assistance of making that victory for America possible.
Well, you know, I can add one thing to the blessing of milk. And that's when we used to have Martha Washington sheet cake. You'd always put milk at the bottom of it. When I get cake, like a deviled food cake or whatever, I still do that.
Martha Washington sheet cake is kind of a big deal in this podcast. And I think I'm going to go out and look for a sponsorship to the producers of Martha Washington sheet cake, whoever they may be, because this keeps coming up. But I got to tell you, if you're going to have a spirit cake, it might as well be Martha Washington sheet cake.
Exactly.
Howie, where are you at now? What's going on? And you've got to have a nice setup. I mean, wherever you're at, you got to have a nice set. What's your setup?
We just moved to Saratoga Springs, and we're actually in the same building that we were in when it initially opened up. They tore down a Price Chopper, you know, one of those food stores, and they built. I told my wife back then, this is going back to 2013. I told her in 2011, we're going to live there. And then from 2013 to 2017, we did. We moved off to Colorado and Maine and all those other places where you and I met and hooked up. And now we've decided to move back, and we're in the same building. Now we're here.
Critical. Well, if you follow that logic, Howie, you might end up back in your cadet room, you and the entire family, you know, because if you're going to return back to the beginning, you might as well bring the whole family back and start from scratch.
The beauty of being here right now is just with my wife, and it's not with my boys, they're a lot. Let's just put it that way. They're a lot. They eat a lot. They do a lot.
How'd you meet your wife? I think you're one of the you guys got married right out of the Academy or right thereafter. How'd you meet your wife, and what's the story there?
Well, her dad went to West Point, class 61. As you know, Sid went to West Point, Sid Smith.
Our classmate.
Yep. And so she was there with her family the night before graduation when we had the dance down at Ike's. She walked by me, and I was sitting next to another gentleman from Lalonis Vineyards, Lolo. And I looked over, and two beautiful women walked by us, and I gave them a 9-5. And then I said, you know what? They're going to come back. And when they do, we're going to dance with them. She thought she was leaving. Her parents told her to come back. It obviously wasn't my charm and wit. And she came back, and I walked immediately up to her, and I asked her to marry me that night. And then I said, do you want to dance? And she thought I was funny. And 38 years later, we're still together.
I don't know how it is these days, but graduation, 500th night, and all those celebratory times are kind of dangerous for sisters, right? So there's more than one story around. Sid was our classmate. Sadly, he's passed away.
Yep.
But Laura, your wife, was Sid's sister.
Well, it's funny because she had come to West Point a lot of times, and Chris Marsh, right?
Mm-hmm.
I knew him from hockey, and I knew him from one really weird day in the soup's office when we both were describing why we still wanted to remain at the academy. And that happened. And but I knew Chris pretty well. And so, occasionally when we're down at Eisenhower Hall, he and I would be doing something stupid, or I'm trying to prevent him from doing something stupid, or both of us. And Laura happened to be there on several occasions because I described the events in detail. And she went, "Oh my God, that was you."
You mentioned a little story there, and I want to laser in on that. Sure. So I did not have the opportunity when I was a cadet to have to go to the superintendent to explain why I still wanted to be there. Only the distinguished members of us had to actually go and explain that they really wanted to graduate. Tell the story of how that happened, since you're in that top tier.
Yeah, I was in the top tier, all right. You know what? I had this one year when I just seemed like I was getting nickeled and dimed for everything. And, leaving the milk out on the, up by the window, you know what I mean? When it's facing the courtyard, central area and all of that. I must have done that too many times. A few other little things that I would do would get me in trouble from the summer, then things that you shouldn't do, taping up Coast Guard Academy cadets and then sending them down a zip line and get caught.
Right. So I like how, Howie, I like how you went right from milk. Gee, I left the milk out on the ledge to zip lining a taped up Coast Guard cadet.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's kind of a leap, but I tell you, it's the kind of leap that you're known for, sir. It's good to hear that.
I had several leaps in there, and but they all added up to a lot of hours for 1 year. And, whether it was, cleaning your room or not cleaning your room or thinking you had cleaned your room, but obviously someone said you didn't clean it enough. And then perhaps a dozen other things that happened. But it all added up to, over time, but almost 200 hours. But they just happened to happen that 1 year when you really didn't want them all to come at once, or a lot of them at once. And so I got put on suspended separation after I explained to, who's it, General, what, oh God, I can't even remember his name now.
The superintendent, Willard Scott.
Yeah, Willard Scott. And
Scott.
Big, tall man. God, he was bigger in person, I got to tell you. And he just sat there and said, "So why do you want to remain at the academy?" And I said, "Sir, I think I have a lot to offer. I think I'd be a great officer, depending on where I go. And I'm ready to go ahead and right this ship and make things happen." And
so for family members out there, when Howie's talking about 200 hours, you would get punishments in terms of number of hours you had to walk on the area.
Right.
So 200 hours means he was what we called a double century man, meaning he had 200 hours. And that is actually hard to achieve. Congratulations. Other than defeating the Soviet Union with your milk consumption, getting 200 hours is pretty legendary. And in fact, I imagine that General Scott, when you have 200 hours worth of slugs, it seems much larger than he did to the rest of us.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I didn't leave a bottle of, it's a big bottle of beer on my window facing towards General Scott's house. I'm not saying I did it, or I'm not denying I didn't. I did do it. I'm just saying I did get in trouble for it.
You were kind of a legend. Like Howie Curtis is a name that a lot of people know.
They do.
You're one of the notables. I don't know if you knew that. If you're kind of a famous guy in the class.
Thank you. I was also
a beer bottle on the ledge might
name.
Help. A beer bottle on the ledge might cement a reputation, if I could be so bold. Howie.
Coming back from spring break and spending a week in the hospital did too.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot.
And you probably experienced more than some of us. So
put a sailboat on the second floor of where E1 is. I put one of those little mini sailboats that were down at the little docks, brought it all the way up, stuck it up on top of the roof there that sits over the stoop, And I did that with a few other guys. I won't name who they were.
Because they're ready. When it comes to being slugged for misbehavior, there is no statute of limitations. They can still have you go back there and serve the
Well,
tour.
you know what?
So
They're still looking for me in New South inside the locker when I hid there. The MPs, when they went chasing after me after I was at top of the hill.
It's still an active. I don't know what the military police call it, but an APB equivalent is still active. They're still looking for you.
Are you familiar with Top of the Hill outside in Helen Falls?
No, tell me more.
There's a bar that's actually at the top of the hill. And you know where the bowling alley is?
Yes.
Well, if you keep going past the bowling alley, there's actually the wall that connects to Thayer Gate. You can get over that wall, and you can get out that way without having to go by anybody. And so me and a couple guys, one night, we decided to do that. And then I think we ended up getting a ride to the top of the hill because we knew it was going to be a hike. And so somebody brought us from the local town. And then we had to come back in. And so we went over the wall again, coming back. Well, somewhere between there and I think we were walking down Thayer Road like idiots. And MP spotted us and we had to run. And the next thing you know, hiding, you know, the old medical building there that was right by Boodles and WKDT, hid underneath one of the EMT vehicles initially. And that, while they're walking around it, and then ran over to, New South, and hid inside one of the lockers. Back then I could fit in the locker. And I waited till morning and to go ahead and leave. And I got away with that one. That was fun.
Look, I'd call that early stage escape and evasion training.
Yeah.
That, you were a pioneer. You were way ahead of the class, and you were making it happen. So look, you were, I would say, once again, top tier for accelerating your escape and evasion training by running from an MP and then hiding underneath a vehicle and then in the lockers. Excellent work.
I didn't have
they're
choice.
making it very strong.
It's out of necessity, right? Anything to not go to jail.
Well, now there's very little wonder how you became a double century standout in the class. That's fantastic. So you were the C4 cowboy. So one of the things that our connection is, I was in C4 as a plebe, and then I moved on, and then you moved into C4. Yeah. So we shared a lot of the same company mates. We had a great group as plebes. I still keep in touch with those folks. But you moved in, and you were at the football games a C4 cowboy, and like everybody in the Corps knows the C4 cowboy because you. So talk about, how did you get that job?
Once again, this came out of necessity. Remember that meeting with General Scott? You know, we really need to show pride, need to show how much you love being at West Point, and all of those things that make you, want to be there. And so that rabble-rouser position type thing came up, and they said, well, why don't you go ahead and be the cowboy? No one's been the cowboy in a long time. And I went, yeah, that'll show commitment. That'll show my, wanting to be engaging with, everybody in the Corps. And it also probably going to keep me out of trouble, which is good, right? You want to be out of trouble. But I had fun.
That was the theory anyway, Howie. That was the theory anyway.
That was the theory. I mean, I honestly had a lot of fun doing it. It took me to a lot of places. I actually did this is a true story. We had the Navy game, right? I had the sound system for the rabble-rousers on the field in my pickup that I was keeping at West Point illegally. And I had to bring it down. I brought it down to Philly. Fortunately, I woke up late. I had to get the system over there. So I literally drive underneath Veterans Stadium. Who comes in right after me while I'm pulling the boxes out of the back of it, putting it on one of those little dollies? The future president of the United States and all his security detail, H.W. Bush. And I think I said that right? H.W. Bush? Herbert Walker Bush?
Herbert Walker Bush,
yep.
Yeah. There you go.
He came out. He's tall. And I got shoved to the wall when they went by. I was in civilian clothing. And here I am with all this equipment. They're all looking at it like, is this guy a bomb threat or something?
Howie, this is why you're a legend. Manhandled by the MPs at West Point, manhandled by the Secret Service. There's no security service in the world that hasn't somehow shoved you up against the wall or somehow had to restrain you.
I did not think I was going to make it in for the game. I was just, we had a similar thing happened at Notre Dame too, but it wasn't those authorities that were throwing me around. But it was just, I had fun while I was at West Point. A lot of people,
many of us didn't. So
I know, but
you helped.
I did.
You helped to even it out. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I had a great time, and but I was mostly known by my middle name, Zoll.
Tell us about how did you get the name Zoll? Is that a family name?
It is.
Is that a name of a favorite hamster? What's going on with Zoll? That's a fantastic name, man.
Howard Zoll is my name, Curtis, right?
Yeah.
My dad's name is Howard Zoll Curtis. The doctor that delivered us both from Anna Jake's Hospital in Newburyport, Massachusetts, was Dr. Howard Zoll. Clearly, my parents and grandparents didn't have the ability to come up with a name on their own.
Literally just to cut and paste from a previous generation.
Yeah, what's the doc's? Yeah, Howard Zoll, just name. Yeah, Howard Zoll's a good name. And,
that's excellent. Well,
yeah.
That's an example of the class of '86 embracing legacy, right? So we carry it forward. Now, your children you have now?
I've got three boys, ages 34, 32, and going to be 30. My middle son and my youngest son just bought a house in Montana. Beautiful place up in the mountains, up by Whitefish Mountain and Lake. And my oldest son, who is still one credit shy of a quantum physics degree for the last 13 years, is very proud of that. And he's, believe me, a lot of money with that direction too. But he's up in the mountains, up by Jefferson and Fairplay in that area. And he does contracting and construction work out there, building homes with a gentleman out there. And he's really good at what he does. He's a mountain man. And my middle son, Scott, who was in the Navy, he was ESW person on the P-3 Orion. Got out of the Navy, got a double major in international relations and Arabic. And ever since then, he number one was pursuing SEALs, but he didn't get that. But he's been doing contracting work for government contractors, essentially flying different types of drones, Reapers, that sort of thing, traveling all over the world every 3 months. And that's why my son is with him, my youngest son, because he takes care of the dogs and he also works while my son's away for 3 months.
Right.
And he's got back from Japan recently, did work over there with the Coast Guard. And you can imagine what. And then now he's going to Poland for obvious reasons. And there
you go.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, I mean the next generation, Reaper pilots going to Poland, doing all these things, and we put ice in milk. So we all have had a price to, we've all had,
had to bear the
part to play in our contribution to America's security. So any Howard Zoll
negative
in that group, or
no.
I mean, this is the investigative journalism part of the podcast. Did you name any of them Zoll?
No, I tried to name them their own individual names. Scott, Michael, and Joshua.
There you go.
Yeah, okay. We started giving less and less interest into the names with our third one. We just whipped something out.
Right.
He was supposed to be the girl.
Not that the random name generator is that handy these days, but I tell you what, by the third one, maybe you just click a button and say, well, it's going to be Greg. I don't know.
Yeah, and he's the one that whenever he cried silly about going to school, before we would send him off if they were bleeding, but with him, it's like all he had to do was say, I'm late today getting out of bed. And, he would end up staying home the whole day.
Right.
He was my high plains drifter. But
that's the half-life of parental care. It's just by number 3,
especially when you're all in hockey.
So talk about hockey. Now I know you were on weight tables, which is the source of the great milk consumption.
Yeah.
I can't speak to the beer consumption. That's kind of on your program. But talk about hockey and tell a little bit about that, because hockey players are notorious for their high spirit.
We do have high spirit. Yes, we do. We have spirit. How about you? But yes, I initially didn't get recruited for hockey at Army. And so I went onto the hockey team because a buddy of mine that I went to school with in high school was the hockey manager, John Donahue. And he's one of the reasons I went to West Point in the first place. And so I went to him and I said, let me be a manager, because at least I'll get to skate as soon as my leg gets better. And I got to skate. I actually got to play a bunch of games for the JV team. I got called up for one game for varsity, in which I didn't get to play, but at least I got to go enjoy the trip. And then after about the 2 years, I looked over at Coach Riley and Sonny Sloan, and I was like, I can no longer, Colonel Sloan, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I need to graduate. And I knew that I wasn't going to graduate if I was playing hockey. God bless those guys that do, play academics there at West Point and get great grades. Some of them starmen are amazing. But for me, aerospace engineering required me to actually spend time doing aerospace engineering. And
why did you choose aerospace engineering at an institution where there's so much of our time was taken up with non-essential tasks like learning bugle notes and marching around? Aerospace engineering, that's a huge degree and very complex. What was your thinking there?
It was something I'd loved in high school. I used to get Aviation Week in Space Technology all the time.
Yeah.
So I was very much drawn to that. In fact, I had applied and got accepted to the Academy, Air Force Academy. But the difference was I was going to be a backseater. And I didn't want that. And I went down for the visit when the boxing matches were going on for West Point. And I just remember, staying with, John Donahue, my friend from high school, and being there and just going down to Ike Hall and then also going to the boxing matches at the gym. It was an immediate draw. I was like, yep, this is where I'm going.
So what drew you? You applied for the Air Force Academy and got in. You saw the boxing. West Point didn't want to be a backseater at the. So I'm following the logic. I don't want to sit in the backseat of an aircraft. Though I love aircraft, so I'm going to go drive tanks. Of
course.
Because I like the boxing, which is a 17-year-old mind in action. I had a similar level of. If you look back at any of our logic, I'm not sure it made sense. But what was it about the military academies or the military in general that drew you?
Well, I applied to several different places. Citadel, I applied to as well. I applied to Norwich. I applied to the Coast Guard Academy. I got into all of them. And then I also applied to USC. Just out there, you know what I mean? No rhyme or reason. I just remember watching the Trojans play football, and I liked them. I thought they were pretty cool. And I thought, well, California is going to be really cool. I've never been there, but I think it would be fun. And so I applied there, and also Embry-Riddle too, because of the airplanes and stuff, right? But I only visited one school. I only went to see West Point, and after I'd gone to West Point, and I walked everywhere, of course, with my person that was with me, John. I walked everywhere. I wanted to see exactly what this was all about.
Well, if you'd have gone to USC, putting a beer on your ledge might have been a little more forgiven, except that it would warm up the beer. I grew up in California, and it's exactly as it's seen in the movies and television shows everywhere. Palm trees, like no matter where you are in California, it's like that. Okay.
So we're only going to go there.
Now, in the Army, what did you do? So, aeronautical engineer, you made it through that. You had to sacrifice hockey.
Right.
You applied to every military academy or military themed school in the United States. You chose West Point, and you remember the Class 86, which I think right there, you can't have reached the higher pinnacle.
Exactly.
What did you do in the Army once we graduated?
Well, I did air defense. Air defense artillery.
Angry about that backseat issue. So you're gonna.
If I can't fly him, I can shoot him down.
Shoot him down. I got you.
Yeah.
The love of aircraft remained.
there was a bunch of us, air defenders,
Mm-hmm.
Mark Aubrey, etc., Mike Curran, all these guys. And we all knew that we wanted to go in air defense, and Mark Aubrey and I both wanted to go to Germany, and that was going to be our easiest way to get to Germany, was to go air defense, branch air defense. And I didn't know I would be married when I went there, but I was, because I wasn't that day. I did, we did branch. But in retrospect, it was perfect, because my wife actually spoke German, because she grew up in Germany, born in Munich. And she lived in Germany for a number of years, her and her family, when her dad was stationed there.
Yep.
And I was, Hawk up in the Fulda Gap area, and Schweinfurt. And it was awesome, because you learn so much about how the military is supposed to work, in terms of, a theater of defense, and how it integrates, from low-level transit routes that you have, and all these flight patterns, and, why planes fly at the altitude that they do in order to ensure a safe return home. I mean, I didn't know any of that when I was at West Point.
Sure.
But air defense artillery taught you that. Well, I was
the desert?
I was an advanced course instructor after I got out of the advanced course. So I was instructing the basic course, actually. And I thought I did a pretty good job at being an instructor in the basic course. But then I got called up by the battalion at Fort Bliss. And I was actually trying to go to military acquisition school, or acquisition, MAC, because I wanted to go ahead and build stuff and put my degree to some use. The Army sees it one way, you see it another way. The Army usually wins, no matter what. So I ended up heading off to, the big desert, and got there at Daharan. Did my few, interpersonal days, just getting stuff, getting things, your weapons, all that sort of thing. I like to call it just the beans and bullets, getting out of there. And then went up forward to King Khalid Military City. And I ended up working at the CRC there. And
what is CRC
Reporting Center. It's where we make sure we're shooting down the right guys, and we're not getting shot down by our own guys. A deconfliction of airspace type thing.
There you go.
And it was awesome, because we had to integrate with all the divisions, but not only all the divisions, but a lot of different countries. The French Foreign Legion were there. Pretty good guys. A guy that sat next to me was from Syria. The guy that sat the other side of me was from the 8th ID. They did not get along.
Really?
Yeah, I'm just telling you. There were some tense moments.
The CRC was not all fun and games. It was not a collegial atmosphere in the CRC.
He kept calling the guy Spetsnaz, and I'm just like, you're going to get us both killed. And and I'm just like, shut up. But thankfully we made it out of there, right? And then I was, just redeployed from Kobar Towers. In fact, I was at Kobar Towers not long before the same building that I was in, regrettably, was attacked.
Yeah.
And my wife's just like, thank God you made it home. Thank God you made it home. Made it home in time for the birth of my middle son, Scott, in July, which was good. So I was there from January to July. And I enjoyed it thoroughly. I did the redeployment of all the 32nd AGCOM equipment back to Germany, and also all the equipment that went back to Fort Bliss. That was my role. I was custom certified, so I had to make sure everything was cleaned properly, all the trucks were taken care of, all of those different things. It was a lot of work, but you also learned about that whole shipping industry as well. The Ro-Ros and how we're doing all these different things to get equipment back to where it's supposed to be. What are the requirements, for
That was the astonishing thing, is the amount of material that was moving. I had to bring back Iraqi equipment as part of my MI duties. And part of that was I learned that importing to the United States demands a certain level of cleanliness. And so we ended up having to clean these So anyway, that's my big logistical story for another day.
That mud didn't want to come out either.
Well, it would have been in there for a while was the problem.
For a
when
while.
you have to cover the entire vehicle with mud to keep it from getting hit from the top, and then you hand it over to your. I guess the best revenge was here. Take this Chinese variant of a command vehicle and clean it after we've buried it in the mud for 5 months. Anyway, another story for another day. What? So 6 years in, you decided the Army wasn't for you. You're going to head out. I mean, I think at the time they were kind of actively encouraging all of us to seek civilian employment. They did it in a nice way and in a polite and professional way, but it was pretty clear that they were drawing down and they wanted us all to go out and be insurance brokers, I guess. But what you got out of the Army? What was your thinking on getting out?
Well, when I came back from Desert Storm, I was working at the battalion level in operations, and when I couldn't get either back to Germany or I couldn't get to like a military acquisition, they wanted me to take command of the headquarters battery. I'm not saying that's a bad job. I'm just saying it wasn't the right job for me. And so I decided at that time, my wife and I were just out having dinner, and I looked over at her and I go, I'm bringing my papers in tomorrow and I'm going to get out. She goes, what are you going to do? And I said, we'll have time to figure that out. But we made sure that the time that we wanted to get out was going to be in like February, March timeframe. And I was deciding this in the November, December timeframe. And I went to those junior military officer conferences and all of that. And, went into pharmaceuticals, and that's where I've been.
And so you got into pharmaceuticals, and was that what carried you forward into your success in this day? And what was that your path?
I mean, I've done a lot of different roles. I've gone with startup companies. I've been, probably favorite role was kidney transplant with BMS. I did it actually twice, where I sold a specific drug for immunosuppression. I was the account manager for almost all of New York and all of Pennsylvania except for Philly. And then for a second time, they moved me to another role because they took it away for a brief period of time because of some issues. And then when I was in Maine, I was working on the cardiovascular side with Bristol Myers. And then when that went away, or I should say, the transplant folks came calling again because they were going to expand again. And then this time I moved out to, they moved me out to Colorado. And I covered the entire.
You and I connected up. Yeah, that's right.
I covered the entire Midwest out there.
And so these were all sales roles. You got in there and used your you used your charm to push product and
you
make
just
America
use your smarts
that way.
I think you use your smarts more than you use your charm. I'm not a handsome man, so it's not going to be charm.
Well, you're a legend now, living in Saratoga Springs, back in the same building you were in in your long trip back to eventually living in your cadet room again. Great family, successful children. We're all turning 60 years old. So if you were to go back 20 years to your 40-year-old self, at this point, probably a successful representative of one of your companies, what advice would you give to your 20 years younger self that you think would help steer yourself a bit?
Just be you. Be the best you can be, and listen to people and, give back. That's about it.
Great.
Nothing special.
And when you want to get back on post and you climb over the wall, don't walk on Thayer Road. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge you got there.
There could be an ATV still for me. You're right. You never know. I think not only in that state, there's probably several other states.
Well, Howie, you're a legend in the class. You're loved by all, and it's been tremendous to have you on the podcast. I really appreciate the time spent with you here, and we look forward to catching you at one of our next events. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of '86 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. We'll see you in the next episode.